Words are hard. I should know, I spent 4 years of my life studying communications. Literally in the first semester, we are introduced to Jacques Lacan, a French bow-tie fashion icon, and to semiotics in general. Semiotics, which I will try my best not to confuse you here, is the study of signs. Signs are how we understand the world and understand each other. We use signs to think and to speak and to know how people around us feel. And to Lacan, we can separate the sign into two parts. The signifier, which represents something, and the signified, the thing represented. If it sounds confusing, it's because it is a little bit, but don't worry, you don't need to get it 100%. The classic example is that of a tree, the signifier being the word itself, tree, and the signified being, the real, true, genuine essence of what a tree is. The image of a tree that forms in your head when I say tree. Tree, tree, tree. The problem here is there is no communication without noise, without some of the original meaning being lost. Because when I say tree, the mental image of this quintessential tree I'm thinking about is always going to be different from the tree that is going to show up in your head. There is also that meme, of somebody asking what a chair is and getting the definition that it is an object with 4 legs that someone sits on, only to be greeted by a picture of a horse. It's an example of noise in communications, but that's usually fine when our sign is a simpler object. Our communication will not be greatly harmed by you thinking of a slightly different tree than what I had in mind. But it gets more tricky when we move to more abstract signs. What is regret? What is freedom of speech? What is America? What is jazz? What is a woman? What is happiness? It's really difficult to settle on a simple, concise concept that comprises everything happiness is and leaves out everything it's not. It's like listening to a song and going, this is clearly indie sludge punk. You might know what it means, but you don't really need to know how to define it. It's hard, and it's literally what we pay dictionary writers for. And since language and everything about it is literally socially constructed, if someone grows up in a jungle alone, they are never going to develop this concept on their own. These are definitions that change from society to society, from time to time. What is Rome will never be answered the same way by someone in Judea in the 1st century and by a British tourist in 2019. And they change throughout someone's life, molded by their life experiences. And video title. So, what is a woman? Engaging with this question is always very tricky because, you know very well, it is almost never asked in good faith. The people who have asked it in recent memory are not really interested in any signified that isn't theirs. Not being driven by learning. You know whom I'm referring to here, but today, I will do my best not to talk about them. Engaging with them is already to lose, and these past few days have been wild and scary and tempestuous and full of defeat. Because of them mostly. This video is made for us, not for them. Because sometimes this question can actually come from a place of longing for understanding of the world and of oneself. Because I once asked this question in a slightly different way. I have asked, am I a woman? What is even a woman? Is it a feeling, a brain, a soul? Well, listen, doctor, deep down inside, what I feel is... What do I feel? Is what I feel more important than what I live or what I decide to do? The road I chose to follow? And I think it is a question that is miles more interesting from this angle, right? But, well, I can already let you know that this video, The Earth Stranger Online, has one fatal drawback. I should never be able to come to a conclusion. I should never be able to fulfill what is, I understand, the first duty of a YouTube video essayist, to hand you after a 40-minute funnily edited piece of film, a nugget of pure and genuine truth to wrap up between the pages of your notebooks and keep on the mantelpiece forever. All I can offer is my own opinion, based on my own experiences. Trying my best to translate to you what is this signify that exists deep inside of me, that was polished and molded by love, trauma, fear, and joy by years and years across oceans and mountain ranges. Something that I could only explore fully after I cut away from home, saved some money, and found for myself a room of my own. Yes, I'm paraphrasing Virginia Woolf here. Don't at me, H-Bomber guy. There goes all of my nuance, but In the same little book from 100 years ago, she writes that when a subject is highly controversial and any question about sex is that one cannot hope to tell the truth. One can only show how one came to hold whatever opinion one does hold, to give one's audience the chance of drawing their own conclusions. Woke feminists. Since 1928, not being able to provide simple and direct answers to direct and observable facts. To something as simple as, what is a woman? I mean, how can we discuss women's rights, the gender pay gap, about protecting women's bodies if we cannot even define what words mean? But well, words are hard. And you know, people are sometimes afraid of thinking too hard about things. Simple answers are so simple and comforting and cozy. Who would want to think too hard about the stranger, the other, the one who is living a life that I would never even dare consider for my close ones? Women, such a mystery. And aren't they scared of the unknown? Who's afraid of Virginia Woolf? And trust me, these same people who are afraid of toilets and have been afraid of toilets for a long, long time were also afraid of Virginia Woolf 100 years ago. I was once scared to think too hard about some things. Things that I couldn't put a name to. Things that I couldn't find which signify to assign to. But that doesn't mean they weren't there. A hidden secret as a kid, hiding in a closet that wasn't mine, trying on blouses that never fit. It turned into agony when I was a teenager, crying and begging for God to take this drive away from me, to wake up in another body, wake up as a shapeshifter. To have a girl hold my hand and comment on how soft it feels for a boy, and to wish silently in utter terror for her to kidnap me away from my life and embrace me as one of her own. Obsessing over low-budget movies and reading poorly written fiction. I know, dear stranger online, that if I tell you like this in an orderly chronological fashion, it seems very clear which signified you want to put on me. But for a 15-year-old small-town girl living in a lonely world, I had no idea what was going on. I couldn't be gay, right? The crushes I had on girls are way too strong and devastatingly dramatic for that to be true. And I had dozens of queer friends. They would accept me and even let me know, hey, have you considered, if they felt that was the case. But it was not. It was just a question, looming by, making me company. For me to pinpoint that sign down, for me to write the story of myself, I needed a room of my own. I was 20 and had finally started to live completely alone. I had ventured into dressing a certain way before, as a joke, or as a costume, or as drag. But now it was just me, alone in a room. No one would judge or create any signs on who I was or what I was doing. So I started to experiment and be more gender-fucky and wear tights and speak differently to inhabit or rehearse a social role that was denied to me for decades. Alone in my room. And the clip you are watching right now is the exact moment, that defining moment, the first time I looked at myself and saw a girl looking back. A woman is someone who identifies as a woman. That is the classic answer, the woke answer, the answer a trans ally would give you. But for me, at least then, it didn't tell me a lot. What is to identify as something, or identify with someone? Is it to look at the other and see a little bit of yourself in them? Was I looking at my girlfriends and seeing a little bit of what I could also be? Or looking at the horrible stories of travestis in my countries, murdered and brutalized and forced out of the rooms of their own into the arms of people who hated them, being scared of what I could have thrown upon me. Was that something that I wanted to identify with? And it felt a little bit out of place because, I had grown around a lot of feminist discourse in college, at times even gender abolitionist in a way. And I tried my best to be a good ally. I knew that I had spent years and years of my life protected by a world of privileges, protected by patriarchy, protected by whiteness, and that has deeply shaped my view of the world and myself. How would I have the nerve to identify with people who went through things I couldn't even imagine, micro and macro aggressions that, at the end of the day, were benefiting me and putting me in a position of power? Where was the limit between identifying and appropriating? Was I overstepping? Did this performance of signs and clothes and makeup even mean anything at all? When asking myself if I was a woman, a trans woman specifically at that, I couldn't tell precisely what that meant. All I knew was that I was driven by an intense feeling. a disjointed, confusing feeling that I had no signified for. But the thing is that this was a feeling that came not of taking something for myself, because I would learn later I would be denied and dressed down a lot of the protections I mentioned earlier. It was a feeling that came from a different place. A place of wanting to be close, to belong. I have said it before on this little channel, but this was a point in my life where basically all of my closest friends were women. We shared moments of tenderness, of true friendship, of openness that I never had before with my male friends. I wanted to be close, and more than identifying as a woman, I wanted them to identify me as one of them, and welcome me and find community. Because that's what identity is about, and deep down, that's where I felt like I belonged. And yes, this is just an internal feeling. Something personal and abstract. A woman is someone who identifies as a woman, and we're left at that. But on the other side, for this group to identify me as one of their own, this had to be externalized in talks, in names, in pronouns, and in performance. I had to learn in my 20s the same thing my friends had to learn when they were so young. Copying their moms, their sisters, other women they looked up to, like a 13-year-old with a favorite pop star reading teen magazines and mimicking their clothes and the way they spoke, like a 15-year-old looking up to an older sister, in the words of Salmajo, as a rival and a hero of the diaries I have stolen, to learn the feminine inventions and be feminine as you. Like every other woman, I had to learn it first. What is it to identify as a woman? To Judith Butler, identity is a practice, it is a doing, not a being. Gender is a kind of imitation for which there is no original. And yeah, not being able to elaborate on this signified alone, I turned to academia because I needed to rationalize this. I downloaded gigabytes of papers on gender and binge-watched the Old Testament contrapoints. So, according to social sciences, which is the coolest kind of science there is, I couldn't be a woman. No one could be the woman. I needed to do as every other woman before has learned to. I needed to do woman first. This all started almost 10 years ago. I have been living the life of a woman for a while now, and all I can share is my personal experience of what has happened to me and how people treat me today compared to how they did back then. And I can assure you, my life today is exactly the same as the life of the women around me, in every single way that matters. Even though I know not everyone reads me as a woman the entire time, and I do have a video about that, I know for a fact that I live the life of a woman, even though weird YouTube comments will try saying, it's just people being polite to me. Trans people are always overbearingly aware of what happens around us. And the examples are so wild and funny that I could list them here all day long. Like the time when a TERF had known me and hung out with me for months before the idea that I was trans even crossed her mind. And the moment she learned it in the middle of a bar, she started a whole lecture like, I don't have anything against trans people, but like the time when I went to do a full health checkup with a doctor who had full access to my medical history and knew for a fact I was taking hormones. I was lying in nothing but my underwear in front of her to do an internal ultrasound and watch the look of utter confusion form on her face when she found a prostate inside of me. Of the time I was extremely drunk in a carnival party, saw the gigantic line in the women's bathroom, and tried to sneak into the men's, only to have security stop me. Not even using my old voice, convince him to let me use the toilet that conservatives want me to use. Of being at a bachelorette party and showing some videos from high school, only to have nobody in the party realizing it was me. And when I told them, they just assumed I was cross-dressing as a boy for some reason. The time when I had a friend think I had the weirdest fetish ever because I had a T4T hashtag in my dating profile. These are funny, small anecdotes, bumps on the road that every trans person will have of people clumsily trying to navigate a world that has a more fluid approach to gender. And that's okay. The funniest thing though, in these 7 years of transition, not once have I been asked about my chromosomes. Because, newsflash, no human being on the face of the earth gives a flying fuck about chromosomes. You can go your whole life without getting them tested. They were only discovered in the 19th century. Were there no women before then? To the world, to the people I love, and to the people who matter, I am an adult human female. To my doctors as well, I have the same hormone levels and most of the secondary sex characteristics that they would have to take into account when examining an adult human female. I am a biological woman as opposed to Barbie, who is a plastic woman. I'm also a woman according to Donald Trump's silly technicist and reductionist definition of womanhood, as is every single human being that ever lived. And it really shows that even though women have been discussing and writing and sharing their experiences and lives and places in the world for hundreds of years, this man who knows nothing of the other, nothing of empathy, comes up with his signified and obliges an entire country to follow him. Donald doesn't know this and Donald doesn't care, but a lot has been said and studied and discussed about being a woman and about womanhood. To be a woman is to belong to a completely diverse social identity that shapes and molds and adapts to cultures and times and ideologies and political leanings and people in their full kaleidoscope of possibilities. It's to belong to a group, even if small or segmented, or not aligned to the ruling class's definition of this group, but to belong and to be recognized in your community as such, not without its power hierarchies and intersectionalities involved. If trans women are women, why do you need to say trans? Is a common talking point, and it makes complete sense, right? Because what is a woman? This archetypical woman that needs no adjective is also defined by the ruling class. Historically, this has been weaponized against many minority groups, and that is why an intersectional approach is so important. Because the ruling class will try to enforce that trans women are less women, that fat women are less women, that butch women are less women, that working class women are less women, that black women are less women. Every single woman who doesn't fit their perfect WASP model of femininity is less women. And by less woman, they mean less human. An intersectional look at what is a woman is absolutely essential because the same arguments that are used to ostracize trans women as a secondary class of women have and still are used to do the same thing against black women. If black women are women, why do you need to say black? After centuries of enslavement, segregation, and not even being given the same civil rights that the suffragettes conquered for white women, it was not long ago that the bathroom debate was not between cis and trans, but between black and white. Historian Gillian Frank writes that white women refused to share bathrooms with black women throughout the South, claiming that racial integration with blacks would cause them to catch syphilis from shared toilet seats and towels in public restrooms. History repeats and repeats itself. First as tragedy, then as farce. And what does the ruling class, what does the patriarchy, what does imperialism hold for gender non-conforming people? What it always had, a tale as old as time. In my home country, Brazil, the first victim of state assassination due to gender nonconformity is documented as an indigenous person from 1614, named Chibira do Maranhão. A person who was not living under the same culture and values as the Europeans, a person who definitely did not have barely the same signified of what is a woman as the people who invaded their land, was sentenced to death under charges of sodomy. Before being killed, the French Catholic priests who executed Chibira have said, and this is absolutely wild, that if Chibira accepted a Catholic baptism before their execution, they would go straight to heaven. And if you wish to have long hair in heaven and the body of a woman, ask Tupã to give you the body of a woman, and you will reincarnate again as a woman. There in heaven, you will remain among the women, not the men. Chibira accepted the baptism, was tied to a ship's cannon, and they fired at them, point blank. 1614. What is a woman? To Simone de Beauvoir, womanhood is the second sex. Mankind, or humanity, is male, and man defines woman not in herself, but as relative to him. She is not regarded as an autonomous being. Man can think of himself without woman. She cannot think of herself without man. And she is simply what man decrees. She is defined and differentiated with reference to men, and not he with reference to her. She is the incidental, the inessential, as opposed to the essential. He is the subject. He is the absolute. She is the other. To be a woman is to be the stranger. In small-town eyes, all persons not belonging to the village are strangers and suspect. To the native of a country, all who inhabit other countries are foreigners. Jews are different for the anti-Semite. Black people are inferior for American racists. Aborigines are natives for colonists. Proletarians are the lower class for the privileged. The subject, the absolute, the cisgender, the man is never ever put in question. Why would he? Where is the far-right documentary, What is a Man? That is a question that is never, ever asked. It's set in stone fully and entirely. Understanding and asking what is a man is essential in understanding this intersectional view of womanhood presented by Beauvoir in The Second Sex. And in 1928, another writer we are already familiar with wrote a fictional novel dedicated to exploring just that. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? It might be a bit anachronistic to say that her novel, Orlando, a biography, has a transgender subtext, but dear stranger online, how incredibly has this book aged? When writing the story of this character, who begins the book as a man but mysteriously transforms into a woman midway through the story, Virginia writes, "For here again we come to a dilemma. Different through the sexes are, they intermix. In every human being, a vacillation from one sex to the other takes place, and often it is only the clothes that keep the male or female likeness, while underneath the sex is the very opposite of what it is above." 1928, before even Lily Elbe had transitioned, but still a much more complex look at sex and gender than many people have today as their signifieds. But Virginia here is not that interested in a gender-fluid, non-binary identities. Rather, Orlando is a story about the limits society imposes on women as a gender, based on a concept as subjective and diffuse as biological sex. As a man, Orlando can own his own property. He can be a writer. Virginia as an author is really pissed at how hard it is to be a woman and write literature, mostly due to financial dependency on a husband. That is the whole deal of a room of one's own. But when Orlando magically TGTFs into a woman, she gets those rights stripped away from her, but gains an entirely new outlook on the power dynamics and the oppression that is tied to one's gender. Something she never even thought about when she was a man. What is a woman? To Virginia Woolf, it is someone who cannot achieve their full potential, create as much as she was born to create, carve and conjure words of literature out of the thin air if she doesn't have some money and a room of one's own. Of course, she is criticizing 20th century financial dependency on a father or a husband, which affected many women from herself to Eunice Paiva, but looking from the personal experience I went through earlier, am I not a woman? Did I not need a room of my own to have autonomy to write the story of myself? Am I not a woman? Am I not paid 60 cents for the average dollar the cis man earns? Am I not a woman? Am I not doing on average 10 extra hours of silent work and duty of care? Am I not 10 times more likely to be abandoned by my partner during serious illness? Am I not holding my keys within my fist when walking home alone at night? Am I not twice as likely to be a victim of partner violence? Am I not more likely to have my opinion discarded, my voice talked over, to be a victim of sexual assault? Look me in the eye and explain to me how it is different. What is a woman? To Judith Butler, it's an open-ended question, with an answer permeating cultural norms, historical formations, family influences, psychic realities, desires and wishes. But in the end, it is each individual's own autonomy to shape their own signified. What is a woman? To Sarah Ahmed, it is all those who travel under the sign woman. Being a woman is an assignment, not just a sign, but also a task or an imperative that can shape us, make us, and break us. There can be violence at stake in being recognizable as woman. There can be violence at stake in not being recognizable as woman. To Margaret Atwood, being a woman is being your own voyeur, because male fantasies run the world. Even pretending you aren't catering to male fantasies is a male fantasy. Pretending you're unseen, pretending you have a life of your own, unconscious of the ever-present watcher peering through the keyhole. What is a woman? It comes from different places to people in different cultures. Like, to Marjane Satrapi, growing into her womanhood during the Iranian Revolution in the 70s, she found that it didn't matter if women were conservative or progressive. Being a woman is to be reduced to fit within a mold that patriarchy had laid out. While to Alison Bechdel, growing into womanhood, a queer womanhood at that, during the AIDS crisis in the United States in the 80s, it was about understanding her father's own femininity in contrast to her masculinity, something often so harshly and cruelly imposed. What is a woman? To Salma Jo, it's someone with strength on her hips and perfume behind her ears. To Linda Quebrada, it's someone who fights against submission. To be a woman is to embrace a ferocious, seductive, and political femininity. To Laura Jane Grace, it's to just want people to stop policing every single detail in your body and notice the ragged ends in your summer dress. To chaperone is someone who hits it like rom pom 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 and gets it hot like Papa John's, like no man could ever do. To Shania Twain, it's the prerogative to have a little fun. What is a woman to Paulo Preciado? Well, that's a trick question. To him, to define what a woman is to reinforce the same techniques of control that we ourselves have been critiquing throughout this entire video. To him, the subject of our fight, the subject of feminism, must never be subjected. What is a woman, dear stranger online? I just gave you 20 different answers. Which one of them is correct? Which one of these answers is the pure and genuine nugget of truth? Well, every single one of them. Because words are hard. And because in society and in communications and in gender, every individual, every signifier and signified is as correct as the other. Yes, a woman is an adult human female, that is right. But a woman is also someone who walks through the world, who experiences joy and pain and deep, deep human connection, living the life of a woman. And I know I wrote some terrible things about life as a woman, difficulties and trauma, and you might wonder, why would anyone ever be willing to go through that, let alone transition into it? And I know things are scary, mostly in the United States this past few days. And that is the reason why I'm writing this. I know that no subjective explanation and signs saying you are valid are going to stop the fact that this government is excluding you from public life, preventing you from accessing basic rights, stopping you from having a goddamn passport, putting the lives of especially Latin, Black, and incarcerated trans people at risk. I know no subjective emotional speech is going to stop these attacks, but I think it's important to remember that these horrible things that make life as a woman, as a trans woman, as a Black woman, as difficult as they are coming from the same place. You can call it the system, or the patriarchy, or the bourgeoisie, or the ruling class. And when the enemy is so easily identifiable, I think it's important to remember that we can fight back. We need to fight back. Stand your ground for all the trans people that have come and conquered these rights for you. Because that is unfortunately the case with liberal democracies. Rights are not guaranteed. They need to be constantly defended. It is time to fight and get involved with your local groups and to support trans people in your community who are going through threats of violence, incarceration, and deportation. Project 2025 is very real, and it's here, and the time is now. This video is, however, a reminder of what we should fight for. Because living our best lives, our happiest lives, the lives that we deserve to live, they can never take that away from us. We have been living these lives for centuries, way before Rowlings and Trumps and Walshes. And if I take away all these statistics, and financial insecurity, and the threats of micro and macroaggressions and institutional attacks that aim to put us down, what is left? What is a woman then? Was it worth it going through all this trouble only to be relentlessly attacked from every single side? What is it that is so essential, so precious, that these people can never take away from us? For me, it's Carnaval. It's having my body out in the street, under the sun, being another human between a bunch of little humans, parading the streets and showing that we are able to love and connect and live. It's the little joys, it's brainstorming a fun outfit together with my best friend, only to not go outside at all and just stay inside talking about our past. What could have been, what should have been. Gossiping about high school people I never heard of. And trying a weird recipe and go for hours living my life without ever feeling different or othered or thinking how they see me or not. To be alone in the metro at 2 a.m. and sit across another girl, a stranger, and see the look of relief shine upon her face because she knows she's safer just to be there with me. To have a random 13-year-old girl approach you in the middle of the street just so she can tell you how cool your outfit is. It's to walk into a queer bar and see yourself into every single person that is in there, laughing and flirting and living. It's to meet 3 other women in line for the toilet, all of you a little bit drunk, and have an incredible bond and joke and have the craziest connection and exchange Instagrams, just to never see them again. It's fleeting and it's beautiful. It's to go shopping with my mom, grab a bottle of wine and spend hours and hours talking about what she has learned while coaching other young women at her work. It's to be in a concert and feeling a friend's hand upon my shoulder when the singer sings that the man will never define you. And a look of sorority. These are small moments, silly moments, short moments, but filled with so much meaning that makes them shout louder than any misgendering attempt or comment the trolls will eventually live on this video. Because that means absolutely nothing. It has no sign, significant or signified to me. But these moments, they mean more than identity. They mean identification. They mean joy. They mean I am a part of this community of 4 billion people, beautiful people, oppressed people who go through so much just to pursue these little moments of joy. And no matter how powerful they get, that is something that they can never, ever, ever take away from us. And that's what keeps me going. That's why I will never regret transitioning, even though it has made me much more vulnerable than I ever was before. Because to be vulnerable is to be human. And in these little moments of sorority and community, I have never felt so alive. What is a woman? It's someone that I will stand by, side, and fight for till my dying breath.